The night I saved him, I did not know I was saving myself. I only knew that something ancient and desperate was dying in the rain, and my hands refused to let it go. I remember the storm as if it still lives inside my chest, a wild and furious thing that seemed to tear at the very foundations of the world. The sky had turned the color of bruises hours before sunset, and by the time true darkness fell, the world had become a roaring, weeping beast. I stood at my window watching the ancient pines bend like supplicants before some terrible god, their branches clawing desperately at the howling wind. My grandmother used to say that storms like this carried messages from the old spirits, warnings written in thunder and rain, prophecies scrawled across the sky in lightning. I had stopped believing in her stories years ago, or so I told myself in the quiet hours of the night. But that evening, something pulled at me, a thread of urgency I could not name. And before I understood what I was doing, I had grabbed my old umbrella and stepped into the chaos. The path to the river was a treacherous stream of mud and fallen branches, barely visible through the sheets of rain that seemed determined to blind me at every step. Water lashed my face and soaked through my woolen cloak within moments, chilling me to the bone until my teeth chattered, but I pressed forward, driven by an instinct that felt older than my own bones, older than the mountains that surrounded our valley. The umbrella was a pitiful shield against such fury, its worn fabric straining and flapping like a wounded bird, but I clutched it like a talisman against the darkness. When I finally reached the swollen riverbank, my boots sinking into the saturated earth, I saw him. He lay half submerged in the flooding shallows, a massive white wolf with fur matted crimson and silver by blood and relentless rain. His great chest heaved with labored breaths, each one a struggle against the cold water that lapped at his sides, and even in the dim and fractured light, I could see the terrible wound across his flank, a gash that spoke of iron and hatred. He was the largest wolf I had ever seen, his body easily twice the size of the village hound's, powerful even in his broken state, and there was something undeniably regal in the lines of his scarred face. Those scars traced pale rivers across his muzzle and brow, marks of countless battles survived, testaments to a life lived in defiance of death. I should have been afraid. The wolves of the deep forest were legends whispered to frighten children, creatures of nightmare and shadow, and the white ones were said to be the most dangerous of all, spirits of winter given flesh and fury, answering to no master but the moon. Every story I had heard since childhood warned of their cunning, their ferocity, their hatred for humankind. But as I stood there with the rain hammering down and the black river rising around his still form, I felt no fear, only recognition, bone deep and inexplicable, as if some part of me had been waiting my entire life to find him in this exact moment, in this exact place. I opened my umbrella and held it over his head, shielding his face from the relentless downpour. It was such a small gesture, almost foolish in its inadequacy, but it was all I had to offer. His eyes opened then, twin pools of molten amber that caught the lightning and held it burning. He looked at me, truly looked, and I felt the weight of that ancient gaze sink into my very soul. There was pain there, vast and profound, and exhaustion that seemed to span centuries, but also something else entirely. Surprise, perhaps. Or wonder at this strange human woman standing in the storm with her tattered umbrella, offering shelter to a dying god. "I cannot carry you," I told him, my voice barely audible above the storm's fury. "But I swear to you, I can try." It took me nearly an hour to drag him to my cabin. I used my soaked cloak as a makeshift sling, wrapping it beneath his massive chest and pulling with all the strength my body possessed while the rain tried to wash us both away. He helped when he could, his powerful legs pushing weakly against the sucking mud, but mostly he was dead weight, and by the time I managed to haul him through my door, my entire body was trembling and my lungs burned as if filled with fire. I collapsed beside him on the rough wooden floor, both of us gasping, both of us alive, and for a long moment we simply breathed together while the storm raged outside. I worked through the endless night to save him. My grandmother had taught me the healing arts before she passed, the secrets of herbs and poultices, and the quiet prayers that sometimes made the difference between death and survival. I cleaned his wound with water boiled over my hearth fire, packed it with yarrow and comfrey and the precious dried moss I kept for emergencies, and stitched the deepest parts with thread I had spun myself. He watched me the entire time, those amber eyes following my every movement with an intelligence that seemed far too vast for any mere animal, and not once did he growl or snap. When I finally finished and sat back exhausted, he let out a long breath and closed his eyes in what I could only interpret as trust. I slept beside him that night, too tired to climb into my narrow bed, too unwilling to leave him alone in his vulnerability. When I woke, pale winter morning light was filtering through my shutters, and the storm had finally exhausted itself into silence. The wolf was still there, his breathing deep and even, and as I watched, his eyes opened and found mine with immediate awareness. "Thank you," I thought I heard him say, though his mouth never moved. "Thank you, guardian." I told myself I had imagined it, a trick of exhaustion. I told myself many things in those first strange days, comfortable lies I wrapped around my heart to keep the growing strangeness at bay. But the wolf did not leave. As his strength slowly returned, he began to rise on shaking legs, to walk with increasing steadiness, to explore my small cabin with a curiosity that seemed almost human. He ate the rabbit I cooked for him and drank from the bowl I filled with fresh water. And every night, he curled beside my hearth and watched me with those knowing amber eyes. The villagers had always feared me, the orphan girl who lived alone at the edge of the forbidden forest, who knew too much about herbs and not nearly enough about propriety. My grandmother had been the same, a healer and a hermit, and when she died, I inherited both her gifts and her isolation. I was not unhappy with my solitude. The forest had always felt more like home than the village ever had, and the whispers that followed me through the market square had long since lost their sting. But now, with the white wolf recovering in my cabin, I felt the danger of my position more keenly than ever. "I should release you," I told him one evening, as the first snow began to fall outside my frosted window. "The hunters will come eventually. They always do when winter grows harsh. If they find you here, they will kill us both." He rose from his place by the fire and padded toward me, his movement fluid despite the healing wound. When he reached me, he lowered his great head and pressed his muzzle against my palm with infinite gentleness. The touch sent warmth flooding through me like summer sunlight, a sensation that had nothing to do with the fire and everything to do with something I could not name. He did not leave. And that night, for the first time since her death, I dreamed of my grandmother. She stood in a moonlit clearing I did not recognize, surrounded by wolves of every color, white and gray and black, their eyes reflecting starlight. Her own eyes, the same deep brown as mine, were filled with a sorrow I had never seen during her living years. "You are the last," she told me. "The last of our line, the last who can hear them, the last who can speak for the forest. The ancient woods chose you before you were born, Alara. It is time to remember who you truly are." I woke with tears cold on my cheeks, and the wolf watching me from across the room, with something like compassion in his amber gaze. The hunters came 3 days later, as I had known they would. I heard them before I saw them, their rough voices carrying through the frozen air, loud with liquor and false bravado. There were 5 of them, led by a man named Aldrich, whose hatred for wolves was legendary throughout the valley. His father had been killed by a wolf in his youth, and he had made it his mission to exterminate every last one. I had seen him before in the market, had felt his cold eyes follow me with suspicion and contempt. I hid the wolf in the root cellar beneath my cabin, covering the trap door with a rug and a heavy wooden chest. "Stay silent," I begged him. pressing my hand to his scarred head. Please. For both of us. When Aldrich pounded on my door, I opened it with a calm I did not feel. He pushed past me without invitation, his men spreading through my home like a disease. They searched everywhere with methodical cruelty, overturning my baskets of herbs, scattering my medicines across the floor, breaking the clay jar where I kept my grandmother's ashes. I stood in forced silence and let them destroy my world, because I knew that any protest would only deepen their suspicion. "We know you are hiding something, witch," Aldrich said, his unshaven face inches from mine. "The white wolf was seen near your cabin, wounded, the beast that has been killing our livestock. Where is it?" "I have seen no wolf," I told him, keeping my voice steady. "I live alone. I harm no one." He struck me then, a backhanded blow that sent me stumbling against my work table, scattering bottles. I tasted blood and felt rage kindle in my chest, but I swallowed it down. His men laughed at my pain. They searched for another hour before finally leaving. When I opened the root cellar, the wolf emerged slowly, his amber eyes dark with barely contained fury. He went to the door and stood rigid, every line of his powerful body taut with violence. "No," I said firmly, placing myself between him and the door. "If you go after them, they will hunt you until you are dead. They will burn the forest to find you. Please, stay with me." He turned and looked at me for a long moment, and I understood something I had been trying to deny. He was not just a wolf. He was something far more, something ancient and powerful. And he was bound to me now in ways I was only beginning to comprehend. That night, he did not sleep by the fire. He slept beside my bed, his massive warm body a wall of protection. And in the darkness, I finally allowed myself to ask the question burning in my mind since I first saw him dying in the rain. "Who are you?" The answer came not in words, but in images, flooding my mind like water through a broken dam. I saw the forest as it had been centuries ago, vast and untamed and sacred. I saw wolves running like silver rivers beneath ancient trees, their howls a prayer to the moon. I saw women standing among them, women with my grandmother's eyes and my grandmother's gift, speaking to the wolves in a language older than human speech. And I saw him, the great white alpha, leading his pack through countless generations, guarding the forest and the sacred caves where the old magic still lived. I saw the pact, the solemn promise made between the first guardian and the first alpha beneath a moon that had witnessed the birth of mountains, a bond that had kept the balance for 1,000 years, and I saw it breaking, one guardian dying after another without passing on the knowledge, the bloodline thinning, the wolves growing isolated and hunted, until only he remained, the last alpha of a dying legacy, searching for the final heir. He had come to find me. He had sensed my grandmother's death and felt the flicker of her gift passing to me, and he had crossed mountains and rivers to reach me. The hunters found him first, wounded him with their iron spears, and left him for dead. But I saved him, and now, with patient devotion, he intended to save me in return. The weeks that followed were unlike anything I had ever experienced. True to some unspoken promise, the alpha began to bring me gifts. I would wake each morning to find herbs I had never seen piled outside my door, rare plants that grew only in the deepest parts of the forest. I would return from the village to discover fresh game cleaned and prepared, enough to last through the harshest storms. And always, I would feel his presence nearby, watching from the shadows, protecting, devoted. He brought others, too. A smaller wolf, female, with silver-tipped fur and gentle amber eyes, who would sit with me while I worked and press her head against my knee. She became my companion during the days when the alpha ranged far, a warm and steady presence that eased the loneliness I had carried so long. Through her, I began to understand the pack, the web of loyalty and love that bound them together. But as winter deepened, so did the danger. Aldrich had not forgotten me. He watched my cabin from the tree line, tracked my movements through the village, spread rumors that grew darker with each telling. I was a witch, he proclaimed. I consorted with demons. I was the reason the wolves had grown bold. Something had to be done. I felt the noose tightening around me, and I knew that soon I would have to make an impossible choice. The night everything changed began with a vision more vivid than any dream. I was standing in the sacred cave from my grandmother's stories, the hidden place where the first pact had been sealed. The Alpha stood beside me, and all around us, the spirits of wolves long dead watched with eyes like stars. My grandmother stood at the center, her hands outstretched. "You must claim your birthright," she said. "You must speak the ancient words and seal the bond anew. Only then will the forest rise to protect you. Only then will you become who you were meant to be." I woke to chaos and the smell of smoke. Torches flickered through the trees, and angry voices shouted in the darkness. The hunters had come at last, not to search, but to destroy everything I had built. I could hear the crackle of flames eating at my cabin walls. The Alpha burst through my door in a shower of sparks. His white fur stained gray with soot. His amber eyes blazed with urgency, and when he pressed against me, I understood. We had to run. I did not hesitate. I grabbed my grandmother's silver pendant and followed him into the burning night. The female wolf appeared at my side, guiding me through the smoke, while the Alpha cleared our path. Behind us, my cabin collapsed in a fountain of sparks, taking with it everything I had ever owned. But as I ran through the snow with wolves on either side, I realized something strange. I was not afraid. The terror I should have felt, the grief for my lost home, none of it touched me. Instead, I felt alive, truly alive, for the first time. The forest opened before us like a door, and I knew it was welcoming me home. We ran for hours through the moonlit wilderness until we reached the sacred cave, a dark mouth in the mountainside framed by pines so old they seemed to touch the stars. Inside, the walls were marked with symbols I almost recognized, spirals and moons and running wolves, and at the center lay a flat stone worn smooth by countless hands. The Alpha stood before me, his amber eyes soft. The female wolf pressed against my legs, and somewhere in the darkness, I heard my grandmother's voice one final time. "Speak the words, dear child. Claim what has always been yours." I knelt on the ancient stone and placed my hand over my heart. I did not know what words to say, but they came anyway, rising from some deep ancestral well within me. I pledge myself to the forest and all who dwell within its keeping. I pledge myself to the pack and the sacred bond that joins us. I am the guardian, the bridge between worlds, now and always. Light exploded through the cave, silver and gold intertwined, and I felt something shift inside my being, a door opening that had been locked since birth. The Alpha threw back his head and howled, a sound of triumph and joy, and the forest seemed to howl with him. When the light faded, I was no longer the frightened girl who had fled through flames. I was something more, something ancient and powerful and finally whole. The hunters never found the sacred cave. They searched for weeks, but the forest turned against them, paths looping back, streams rising to block their way. One by one, they gave up and returned to the village, and eventually, the stories of the witch who disappeared became legend. But I did not truly disappear. I lived, fully and joyously, in the heart of the forest I had always loved. The Alpha stayed faithfully by my side, no longer just a wolf, but a partner, a protector, a king who had chosen me as his sacred charge. Every night he would bring me offerings, rare herbs and warm pelts, and sometimes just his steady presence. His body curled around mine as we slept beneath the stars. The other wolves accepted me completely as one of their own, and the silver female who had guided me through the fire became my dearest friend. I learned the old ways through patient practice, the forgotten magic grandmother had only begun to teach me. I learned to speak to trees and read messages in the wind. I learned to heal wounds that should have been fatal and coax life from frozen ground. And slowly, I began to understand my purpose, not just to protect the forest, but to restore the balance lost through generations of neglect. Years passed, seasons turning like pages in a book I was only beginning to read. The village eventually forgot its fear and sent people seeking my help. Mothers with sick children, hunters with wounds, young lovers seeking blessings. I helped them all, and gradually, hatred faded into respect, and then into reverence for the guardian of the wood. And through all those years, the Alpha never left me. He grew older with dignity, his muzzle whitening, his scars deepening, but his eyes remained the same. Amber pools of warmth and wisdom. He had waited centuries for me, and now he spent his remaining years ensuring I would never be alone. On the night he finally closed his eyes for the last time, I held his great head in my arms and wept. But even as grief tore through me, I felt something else, gratitude so overwhelming it seemed to fill the world. He had given me everything, a purpose, a family, a home. He had shown me who I truly was. And in the spring that followed, when a new white pup was born in the den beneath the sacred cave, I looked into its bright amber eyes and smiled through my tears. The cycle would continue unbroken. The ancient bond would endure. And I, Ilara, guardian of the eternal pact, would carry our story forward until it was time to pass the trust to another. I still remember the night I saved him, the cold rain and the mud and the desperate weight of his body. I remember our eyes meeting, the recognition that changed everything. And I understand now what I could not have known then. He was never the one who needed saving. He came to save me from a life half-lived, from fear and loneliness and never knowing my true self. And in doing so, he gave me a life more beautiful and wild and sacred than I ever could have imagined. The forest whispers his beloved name when the wind blows through the ancient pines. The wolves sing his memory to the watching moon on clear winter nights. And I, Ilara, guardian of the eternal and sacred pact, carry him with me always in the beating of my heart. This is our story, his and mine, written in starlight and wolf song, carved into the ancient stones of sacred caves, and it will never truly end.